The story begins on another average morning for Lee Na-mi, a young woman who works an ordinary job at a company startup, as well as a part-time job at her father's cafe. She starts her day by making a presentable breakfast, posting it immediately on Instagram, then heading off to work as she answers countless work-related emails and messages from her friends. Her work requires her to be on her phone all day, and she becomes heavily reliant on it, spending most of her time either negotiating deals with her clients or chatting with her friends. The following night, she makes plans with her friends and ends up wasted at a karaoke bar while keeping her social media updated with her late-night drunken adventures. She returns home on a public bus. Later that night, however, she ends up leaving her precious phone behind as she hurries to get off at her stop. The phone is next seen being picked up by a mysterious stranger. The next morning, Lee Na-mi's best friend calls her phone, which is picked up by the stranger, who manipulates the call and converses with her using a woman's voice. Later, the ominous man looks through Lee Na-mi and her friend's Instagram accounts and even tries to figure out her phone's password. Fortunately, though, he fails to succeed. The following day, her friend finds Lee Na-mi crashed on the floor of her apartment and explains the situation to her, which freaks her out as she realizes her phone might be gone forever. She quickly reaches out to the stranger and asks them to drop her phone off at her father's cafe. Meanwhile, at a nearby crime scene, police detective Woo Ji-man and his team discover an old, rotten body that's been ravaged by a boar. He remarks about the rain and how it washed off all the evidence and curses the meticulous killer for the cold-blooded murder. Other investigators discover a vial containing plant food at the crime scene but don't think much of it, labeling it as random litter. As the detective ventures deeper into the forest to investigate, he stumbles upon a plum tree. Upon closer inspection, he discovers a similar vial buried near it, as was seen near the dead body. The tree has a label with the name Woo Jun-young on it, which is astonishingly the detective's own son's name. Later, Woo Ji-man reveals that he hasn't been in contact with his son for over 7 years and refuses to believe that he would be capable of such a heinous crime, blaming it on his bad company. Back at Cafe Mizi, Lee Na-mi is working with her father when she receives a call from the stranger, telling her that he accidentally broke her phone and that she can pick it up from a repair shop. Upon reaching the location, she finds herself before a desolate building with no other person in sight. After some struggle, she finally finds the repair shop and fills out a form where she is made to note down her phone's password. In a shocking turn of events, the repairman standing before her turns out to be the same stranger who had picked up her phone. However, Lee Na-mi is oblivious to this. It is revealed that the man had designed this whole twisted scheme to gain access to her phone's password so he could install some kind of spyware on it, allowing him to see everything Lee Na-mi does through her phone's cameras, as well as mirror her phone's screen on his own duplicate device. Later that night, when Lee Na-mi is finishing up her shift at the cafe, the creepy stranger pays her another visit and requests a plum drink that is no longer on the menu, and praises it, calling it the best plumade in town. This surprises both Lee Na-mi and her father, as most people aren't fans of the plumade. The man has, of course, gathered this intel by spying on the poor girl via her phone and discovering that she loves the said drink. The following night, Detective Woo Ji-man returns to his home, still reeling in shock from the revelations about his son, Woo Jun-young, recalling how his good-for-nothing son had abandoned his sick mother and moved out years ago. As he checks his wife's phone, he discovers that their son is still in contact with his mother. It is then revealed that Woo Jun-young is the same creepy man who is stalking poor Lee Na-mi. Woo Jun-young spends days in and out obsessing over Lee Na-mi's life, monitoring her every move and making comprehensive notes about her work life, her social circle, her family, as well as her online activities. His plan is to get rid of the 3 most important people in Lee Na-mi's life: her father, her best friend, and her supportive boss. Meanwhile, Detective Woo Ji-man officially begins his hunt for his own son, tracking him down to his residence. As he breaks in and searches around the house, the sinister reality of his son's secret life is gradually revealed to him. He finds numerous pieces of evidence that link him to the dead body discovered earlier, including the victim's photos and detailed notes about her personal life, similar to what he was doing to Lee Na-mi. Just as the detective is rummaging through his things, Woo Jun-young arrives at his house too. However, his instincts suspect something fishy, making him sneak away for the time being. He then proceeds to observe the scene through a window and sends his father on a frenzy in pursuit of him, but to no avail. Jun-young is a master at stealth and easily evades his father, always being just barely out of sight and reach. Before disappearing, he makes sure to flood his own house, destroying all of the evidence. In an effort to further build rapport with Lee Na-mi, Jun-young meets her at the cafe once more, under the guise of buying a CD from her, and even sells her tickets to an upcoming event. Her father becomes wary of his creepy behavior and in a heated argument with her, warns his daughter to stay away from him. Unbeknownst to them both, Junyoung learns about this through Lee Na-mi's phone. Back at her house, Lee Na-mi gets an unanticipated visit from her best friend Jong Yun-ju, who had an argument with her mother and ran away from her home, hoping to find a place to stay at Na-mi's house. Na-mi recounts her experiences with the strange man and shows her best friend the tickets she bought from him, making her tease her about having a crush on him, a claim that Lee Na-mi immediately denies. Later at night, Junyoung sends Na-mi's father a text from her phone once she falls asleep, apologizing for her behavior and asking him to download the same spyware on his phone, lying and saying it'll help him track her phone easily if it ever gets lost again. Gaining control over his phone now, Junyoung lures Na-mi's father out of his house by sending him a fake parcel and knocks him out as soon as he gets the chance, progressing in his sick mission to destroy Na-mi's life. The next morning, Na-mi wakes up to multiple missed calls from her boss and her inbox being flooded with messages. As she checks her Instagram, she discovers to her utmost horror a post on her secret account detailing the fraudulent dealings of her company with their customers. This is all a lie, however, and another one of Junyoung's tricks. Lee Na-mi is rudely confronted by her dear boss and violently kicked out and fired from her company. Back at Cafe Mizi, Na-mi and her best friend ironically contact Woo Junyoung in an effort to catch the perpetrator since he had posed as a cybercrime worker before. Junyoung asks Na-mi if she lives with a roommate, indirectly implying that the spyware was downloaded on her phone directly by her best friend who was staying the night with her. After a dramatic confrontation, her friend leaves and asks Na-mi to never contact her again, offended by the absurd accusation. Meanwhile, the police discover a total of 7 dead bodies buried under a mountain, expecting more to be found. Detective Woo Ji-man and his partner already suspect Junyoung behind these brutal murders and track down his mobile repair shop. However, they're greeted with another flooded room with all the evidence completely destroyed. It seems as if Junyoung is almost mocking them. At the same time, Lee Na-mi arrives at the repair shop with some policemen too, suspecting that it was after her phone was picked up by a stranger that her life turned upside down. The detective recognizes her name from one of Junyoung's notes and investigates her. Soon, it becomes clear to Lee Na-mi that it was Junyoung all along who was hell-bent on destroying her life. Na-mi and the detectives plot an elaborate plan to catch Junyoung by making him come to her place. Junyoung gets a haircut and changes up his look, assuming that the girl has developed a crush on him. When he arrives at her house, his own father fails to recognize him and they let him go. Thus, the master of deception evades the police once more. As Junyoung leaves without meeting her, the detectives drop Lee Na-mi off at her father's house so she has a safe place to rest for the night. Na-mi tells them that if she ever finds herself in trouble, she'll contact them explicitly via text, using another old phone. Inside her father's house, she finds him deep asleep in his bed, so she goes to rest in another bedroom. There she is contacted by Junyoung, and she slowly realizes that the creepy stalker is inside the same house as her. Terrified, she rushes to warn her father, only to find a lump of pillows in his bed instead. In the kitchen, she finds Junyoung waiting for her, and he reveals the reasoning behind his elaborate schemes. Lee Na-mi learns that Junyoung destroyed her life not because of some personal vendetta, but simply because he felt like it. He blames his psychopathic tendencies on the inattention of his father and refuses to take responsibility for his killings. Furthermore, he asks Lee Na-mi to text the detectives and assure them of her safety, then leads her to the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, she is horrified to discover her father tied up and duct-taped in the overflowing bathtub, on the verge of drowning. Junyoung ties Na-mi up and throws her in the bathtub along with her father, taking a final photo of her desperate face, thinking it'll be her last. But what he soon realizes is that the police detectives had secretly asked Lee Na-mi to only communicate by calling them, and thus they've already been alerted of the danger by her texts and are on their way to rescue her. Detective Woo Ji-man and his partner soon arrive and quietly invade the house, hoping to finally catch the cold-blooded killer red-handed. His partner is about to be ambushed by Junyoung when Detective Ji-man saves him and holds the madman at gunpoint. While his partner urgently searches the house to rescue Na-mi and her father, Detective Ji-man interrogates his own son, hoping to learn more about his sins. However, getting a closer look at Junyoung's face, the detective finds himself perplexed and unable to recognize his own son's face. At first, he blames it on the 7-year-long radio silence between the two, but the killer soon confesses that the detective's real son was his very first victim and pioneered the beginning of his twisted games. He reveals that he had chosen the real, vulnerable, and neglected Woo Jun-young as an ideal candidate to kill and impersonate, and to go on a killing frenzy under his name. Meanwhile, inside the bathroom, the detective's partner discovers Nami's father in a very critical condition and starts giving him chest compressions. Nami is still in a deep state of shock, lying limp on the bathroom floor. Hearing her stalker's voice from the outside snaps her back to her senses, and she furiously walks toward him, grabbing the detective's gun on her way. In a final confrontation with the man who ruined her life, she shoots him in the chest, watching him slowly fall unconscious. When she turns around with tears in her eyes, she finds her father finally resuscitated and cries out in relief. As Lee Na-mi and her father are taken to the hospital to be given medical attention, the crime scene is swarmed by media outlets as well as the police, all ironically pointing their mobile phones at the victims. Later, when the investigators dig deeper into the killer's history, it is revealed that he was unregistered at birth, which allowed him to easily take on another man's identity. Days later, Lee Na-mi reunites with her father and her best friend at Cafe Mizi, relieved now that the psychopath is under custody. The movie ends on an unsettling note as Nami looks directly at someone recording her, hinting at the never-ending risk of invasion of privacy in this age of smartphones and social media.